Well, folks, thanks for joining us here on Day to Day, where we hope to give you daily insights into some of the biggest news items happening at home and also around the world. Insights maybe which you're not going to glean from mainstream media. Let's take a look at the first story. We've got a situation where you've seen in the news Canadian Air Force planes, they're the big Hercs, are airdropping supplies apparently into Gaza. And the UN itself is saying and asking Canada, saying not to do this. It's just creating chaos because there's a lot of supplies coming in. And Hamas still, all news reports internationally now are agreeing on this. Hamas steals almost all of the supplies, the food supplies that come in to feed those folks in Gaza. As a matter of fact, the latest UN report is that 89% of the food supplies that are coming into Gaza are in fact being stolen by Hamas, and they resell those supplies for their own purposes. And they're saying Canada is not helping the situation. Now, the other question that arises is there is a group called the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, and they're supported by a number of different groups. They come through the border at Israel. There's hundreds of trucks come through since May the 26th. They have brought it in, recorded statistically, 100 million meals since May 26, brought in by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation into Gaza. And it's all they can do to keep it from being stolen. Hamas is clearly, and this is video supported, stopping Gazans from even trying to get the food. In some cases, shooting at or firing rockets at the places where the food is coming in. And Canada is not helping the problem, as you'll see in some of the photos, by dropping, parachuting in indiscriminately boxes of food, which in many times wind up either in the ocean or in very difficult places, or in fact, it's been recorded even landing on the tents of some of the Palestinian people. Why is Canada doing this? Why would they not be helping out or participating with the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, for instance? There's some speculation that it may be due to the fact that Prime Minister Carney made a very untimely and very unfortunate diplomatic flaw just a few days ago by announcing the fact that Canada is going to support a Palestinian state. Now, this is the first time in Canadian history that a prime minister has said there will be support for a state that has no borders, no boundaries, no government, no freedoms, and Hamas in their charter, and this is rarely repeated in mainstream media, in Hamas's own charter, they are committed to vaporizing, that's exterminating Israel, and killing all Jews everywhere. And here we have the Prime Minister of Canada giving support for a state. It's simply untenable. Let's get the Canadian government supporting some of the good and proper humanitarian outreach that is going on now, but not muddying the waters with this indiscriminate dumping of food, creating chaos in Gaza. So as we move from that story, let's take a look at some polls, very interesting. On the Canadian scene, the party that gives the most support, you may find this surprising, the party that gives the most support to the Hamas group, most support to Hamas and most support to immediately declaring that there should be a Palestinian state, and this is before there's even any borders being marked out, even any kind of treaty, even any commitment from Hamas to stop their killing and release the hostages. So in the NDP, the federal NDP party, 41% of people in the NDP party in Canada fully support that position, support the Palestinian cause, not Israel's cause. That's the largest support from any political party. There's some speculation that the reason that the Prime Minister has ordered quickly a plane load of supplies to be just dropped indiscriminately into Gaza is because they're trying to take away some of the support which presently resides with the New Democrat Party and drag that over to the Liberal Party. I hope that's not true. I hope that this whole situation isn't coming down to where the most votes reside, but it should be on principle, and on the principle that Israel has a right to protect itself and that Hamas needs to give up those hostages. If Hamas would give up the hostages and agree to the ceasefire, this would be over immediately. As a matter of fact, it is reported that Hamas was very close to doing this ceasefire just last week when Canada joined a few other countries and started clamoring about Palestinian statehood, and then Hamas pulled back out of those discussions. It was on the brink of a ceasefire. Hamas pulled out. Canada did not help in that regard. Switching to one of our favorite topics lately, and that's the whole issue of tariffs and the tariff war. It's not just Canada that seems to be in conflict with the US right now, but in fact, Trump is talking about raising the tariffs on India, hitting them very hard because they continue to buy their energy resources, their oil and gas, from Russia. Therefore, India is actually supporting Russia in its war. As a matter of fact, the EU continues to support and buy energy products from Russia, even though it's supposed to be embargoed. And this underlies the whole question of, here we have in Canada with probably and arguably the richest supply and best refined energy products in the world, whether it's oil or natural gas. And we have the federal government, and we have especially some provinces saying there is no way there's going to be pipelines going across their land, going across their province. In some cases, like Quebec, where they still import oil from Saudi Arabia, they're saying there's no way pipelines are going across the land. Canada could be meeting India's need for energy, helping the hundreds of millions of people that are in dire poverty in India. Canada could be helping the EU to break its dependency on Russia for its oil supplies. But in Canada, we refuse to let the best refined energy products in the world, that's Canadian products, flow to these countries, which, by the way, would wind up in a net reduction of emissions. Because if India can move away from hundreds of millions of people using dung, literally, they manufacture, they store, and ship dung, that's cow dung, to provide their cooking and heating needs. Our natural gas could be going to China and helping them get off their massive dependency on coal. So Canada's natural gas, Canada's refined oil products could actually be reducing world emissions. But we have governments and politicians who are held captive by an extreme left so-called climate group, environmentalist group, and in defiance of and going against the actual statistics which show shipping and exporting our product would lower emissions around the world. Would really like to see federal government and these provincial governments change their stubborn ways and start to really help the world, not just environmentally, but in fact on a diplomatic and world scale when it comes to some of the wars that are ongoing. You know, the gender issue continues to obviously play largely in people's thinking. The US has just announced that the Nexus card, which I personally had the opportunity to work on when I was Minister of Public Safety and develop that Nexus card, which helps people go back and forth across the border far more quickly than in those long lineups at airports. The US is now removing the designation where if a person wanted to say they were neither male nor female, they could put an X on that application form. And that is now being removed. You're going to have to, if you're applying for a Nexus card, keep that in mind. You're going to have to be saying you're male or female. Already we have human rights groups in Canada crying foul and saying this isn't right. But you know, you need to look from the point of view of what your declared, what your actual gender, your sex is at birth. That's what you declare. That's what the US is demanding. It's going to be coming to passports. It's not there yet, but it's already coming into play now when it comes to reapplying or applying for your Nexus card. So keep that in mind. And don't forget, the polls show clear majority clear majority of Canadians are in support of what Alberta's premier has put in place in terms of no alterating surgery, no chemical alteration or pharmaceutical alteration of children when it comes to gender. When it comes to them being adults, they can make that decision. But the position of the Alberta government has clearly been we love and respect, they love and respect all people, as we should, and people's choices. But we need to protect children, especially in an area that medically and statistically it's being increasingly shown that it's best to wait. The whole issue of suicidal ideation, which often gets thrown at the politicians, saying if you don't allow kids to go ahead and get surgically or chemically altered, you're going to increase their possibilities in terms of suicide and suicide ideation. All tests, all statistics show it's actually the other way around. Kids who are struggling with dysphoria and are moving ahead and going and getting these life altering changes are having much higher rates of suicidal ideation. So let's go with what more and more of the medical community are saying, and let's go with what most Canadians are saying. Go with the gender at birth. Don't let kids be altered chemically or pharmaceutically. And men in men's sports and women in women's sports, and keep private places like locker rooms and shower rooms between men who are born as men and women born as women. Most Canadians, that's a majority support view by most Canadians. And we look at the financial areas again, just going back to the tariffs a bit. There's a new CEO of the Health Pension Fund of Ontario, and her name is Annesley Wallace. She's doing a very good job there. And her reflections just recently are to definitely, they are keeping a close eye on the effects of tariffs and what's that doing to the not just individual pension decisions, but the decision making of those of large pension funds who are deciding where your and my long-term pensions should be invested. And they are saying it's an area of some indecision right now. Nobody's quite sure how things are going to work out. They are saying it's best to obviously leave your funds in those pension funds. Right now, people are, to a slight majority view in terms of investment, betting against the Canadian dollar and betting in favor of the American dollar. And keep in mind also that in the US, President Trump has announced they're going to be allowing their 401ks. That's somewhat similar to, in the Canadian scene, our RRSP funds. They're going to be allowing movement of those funds on an individual basis, if that's what individuals want, into elements of cryptocurrency. And that's estimated to be $9 trillion worth of that. That's the amount of the funds. Some of that could be moving into crypto. Something else that other countries like Canada, who may be not allowing that, need to keep an eye on in terms of what that's going to do with major decision on funds like the Ontario Health Fund, which traditionally has been bringing in on annual rates of 10 to 11% of returns, pretty good returns, and they're watching that carefully now. On the culture front, let's take a look at what's happening in, sometimes we call it the culture wars, sometimes we call it the culture laughs. We have a situation where there's a remake, as you may have heard, of the film Jesus Christ Superstar. And the person that is playing that part, the part of Jesus Christ, is in fact a black woman. No problem with the fact that she's black, that the person is black. Huge problem among Christians around the world that Jesus Christ is being portrayed as a woman with, in the film, super long fingernails, for one thing, and a distinctly non-biblical approach. Many denominations are raising their concern on that. But it's important to notice a distinction here. In democratic societies, as much as Christians might not like this trend or this situation where a woman is going to be playing Jesus Christ, there's no threat of violence. There's no threat that there's going to be bombings against the theaters or people attacked. And people are asking the question, what if another religion was being portrayed, another leader being portrayed who historically is known as a man and now being portrayed as a woman? What if, for instance, there was a movie being made of Muhammad and that person was being portrayed as a woman. I wonder what kind of reaction would be going on there. So little question marks out there of interest on the culture front. On the sports front, the women in the NBA seem to be getting quite a bit of negative attention, a lot of negative stuff going on there, in spite of the fact there's some great athletes in that league. But not so in Canada. We've got some great things going on with our female athletes, notably, of course, Summer McIntosh, our swimmer. She gets a fair bit of coverage. I'm surprised she doesn't get more, because she deserves even more. She's just knocking it out of the park in the number of records she's breaking, the speed at which she's breaking them, at the young age she's breaking them. So Summer McIntosh doing very well there. Keep an eye on her. And also, just as recently as yesterday, a rising tennis star in Canada, Victoria M. Boko, I hope I pronounced her name correctly, has just knocked off the number one seed in the National Bank tournament, open tournament that's going on right now. She knocked off the number one seed. Victoria is very young. She's 18, and is now advancing to the semifinals. So watch for that on Wednesday night, as a potential young Canadian superstar moves up into superstar status. That's it for today, folks. Tune in tomorrow. More updates to come. Thanks.